The light in the grand resonator chamber was the color of a dying star, a deep, sorrowful crimson that pulsed in time with the slow thrum of the world engine deep beneath the Cathar Imperium's capital spire. It was a light of ancient power, of history, of finality, and it painted the carapaces of the assembled High Council in shades of blood and shadow. At the heart of the circular chamber, a vast holographic sphere shimmered, its surface a swirling chaos of incomprehensible data streams. This was the source of their dread, an anomaly that had silenced the collective resonance of their entire civilization, replacing the harmonious psychic chorus of a billion minds with a single, discordant note of fear. For weeks, this sphere had shown them the same impossible object, a lone vessel that had appeared at the edge of their sovereign space, a ghost in their most sophisticated sensor nets. High Lord Valerius, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the dying light in 1,000 fractured patterns, rested his manipulative claws on the obsidian dais before him. He was old, his form heavy with the weight of centuries, his mind a repository of imperial doctrine and the long, unbroken line of Cathar supremacy. Yet the calm certainty that had defined his reign had been scoured away, leaving behind a brittle shell of authority. He gazed into the sphere at the image of the alien ship. It was a stark, brutalist design of dark, non-reflective metal, a splinter of geometric perfection that seemed to absorb the light of the nearby nebula rather than reflect it. It betrayed no markings, no omissions of consequence, no sign of life as the Cathar understood it. It simply existed, a defiant violation of celestial mechanics and imperial security. The readings remain unchanged. Strategos Kalen's voice resonated through the chamber, each syllable a sharpened shard of steel. His own carapace was younger, sleeker, designed for war, his every posture a study in coiled aggression. He stood opposite Valerius, a dark mirror of the Empire's martial will. Its energy signature is a paradox. Our deep-field gravimetric sensors report a mass equivalent to a dwarf moon, yet its quantum signature is null. It is simultaneously there and not there. It radiates immense power on one spectrum and absolute zero on another. It is a physical impossibility, a wound in the fabric of spacetime. His statement hung in the air, thick and suffocating. A wound? That was what they all felt in the resonance, a subtle tearing at the edges of their shared consciousness. The ship was not merely present, it was an intrusion on a fundamental, almost spiritual level. And what of its composition? Valerius asked, his voice a low vibration that seemed to emanate from the very stone of the chamber. Archivist Lyra stepped forward from the shadows. Her form was more slender, her exoskeleton polished to a mirror sheen, etched with the intricate sigils of her caste, the lore keepers, the diplomats, the interpreters of the unknown. Unlike Kalen, her gaze upon the sphere was one of intense, frustrated curiosity rather than outright hostility. The material is unknown, High Lord. It does not reflect any scannable frequencies. It does not radiate heat. It does not shed atoms into the void. It is absolute. Our material science cadres have no classification for it. They theorize it is not constructed but willed into being, a concept that borders on theological nonsense. Kalen let out a short, percussive click of his mandibles, a sound of profound dismissal. Theology will not protect us. This vessel, this human vessel, as the fragmented linguistic packets we intercepted suggest, has sat at our border for 3 full cycles. It has not responded to a single one of our hails. It has not moved. It simply watches. This is not the behavior of an explorer. This is the posture of a predator. The word human was new to them, a whisper from a dead channel they had managed to partially decode. The language was a chaotic jumble of sounds, lacking the psionic nuance and logical structure of their own tongue. It was, to their sensibilities, the language of barbarians, and these barbarians possessed a warship that defied physics. A predator that does not hunt strategos? Lyra countered, her voice smooth but firm. It has made no aggressive maneuvers. It has deployed no scout drones, fired no warning shots. Its silence could be interpreted as caution, not malice. We are an empire of 1,000 worlds, our presence known across this entire galactic arm. Perhaps they are simply overwhelmed, afraid to make a mistake. Fear, Kalen's resonance flared with contempt. A species capable of building such a vessel does not feel fear. They project it. This is a test, High Lord. They are probing our defenses, gauging our response time, our resolve. Every moment we hesitate is a moment they learn more about our weakness, our indecision. The Imperial fleet is massed and ready. We must strike now before they can call their brethren. We must excise this tumor before it spreads. The Strategos' words resonated with a powerful, primal logic that appealed to the deepest instincts of the Cathar. They were an empire born of conflict. unified through conquest. Their history was a litany of vanquished foes and assimilated territories. The answer to a threat had always been overwhelming, unpitying force. A significant portion of the council members shifted, their collective thoughts aligning with Kalen's, a tide of aggression beginning to swell within the chamber's psychic architecture. Valerius felt the shift, the familiar and comforting certainty of war. It was the old way, the tested way, but something held him back. It was the sphere, the impossible ship within it. It was the silence. The Cathar had conquered races of immense technological might, fleets of living ships, energy beings from the core worlds. They had faced every conceivable form of warfare, but they had never faced an enemy that was a logical contradiction. To strike it would be to strike a ghost, a phantom. What if their weapons passed through it? What if it simply vanished, only to reappear in the heart of their home system? The unknown was a variable he could not calculate, and it terrified him more than any armada. "Your certainty is a comfort, Kalen," Valerius said slowly, his ancient eyes never leaving the hologram. "But it is based on a foundation of ignorance. We do not know their numbers, we do not know their weapons, we do not know their intentions. We only know that their science is to ours as the ocean is to a single drop of water. To attack such an entity is not courage. It is a gamble with the soul of our empire." He turned his heavy gaze to Lyra. "Archivist, you have studied the fragments of their language, their culture. What is your counsel? What kind of mind builds a ship that is also a paradox?" Lyra moved closer to the dais, the crimson light illuminating the thoughtful posture of her head. "The linguistic fragments are revealing, High Lord. They are chaotic, yes, but they possess a staggering depth. We have found traces of poetry, of philosophical debate, of scientific notation so complex it seems to be describing not just the universe, but the rules that govern the universe itself. Their language is not primitive, it is layered. It seems to accommodate individuality, contradiction, and emotion in a way our own language, with its focus on collective clarity, does not." She paused, gathering her thoughts, her psionic presence a calming influence against Kalen's martial fire. "They speak of concepts we have long dismissed as inefficient, of empathy for other life forms, of a moral imperative to preserve knowledge, of a deep, almost painful reverence for something they call potential. It is my belief, High Lord, that we are misinterpreting their vessel. We see it through the lens of our own history. We call it a warship because that is the only context we have for such power. What if we are wrong? What if its purpose is not to destroy?" "Then what is its purpose?" Kalen's voice cut through her careful analysis. "To sit silently at our border, radiating impossibility. It is an act of intimidation, plain and simple. A demonstration of power meant to paralyze us with fear. And I, for one, will not be paralyzed." The debate raged for hours, a storm of logic, fear, and tradition. The council was fractured. To strike was to risk annihilation at the hands of a superior power. To wait was to invite a potential invasion, to appear weak and decadent. Valerius listened to it all, the weight of 1 billion lives pressing down on his ancient mind. He felt the Empire's future balanced on the edge of a knife, and the hand that held it was his own. He looked at the human ship, the silent black splinter against the stars, and felt an emotion he had not experienced since he was a youngling, long before he became High Lord. He felt small. As the second sun of their world began to set, casting long, distorted shadows across the chamber, a new alert chimed, cutting through the heated debate with the cold, clear tone of imminent crisis. A technician's psionic projection flickered into existence beside the central sphere, its form trembling with agitation. "High Lord," the projection broadcasted, its thought voice strained. "The anomaly, it is moving." A profound silence descended upon the chamber. Every eye, every mind was fixed on the holographic sphere. The human ship, after weeks of absolute stillness, was finally in motion. It did not ignite engines. There was no flare of propulsion, no gravimetric wake. It simply began to glide forward, a silent, effortless movement that was more unnerving than any display of raw power could have been. It moved with the grace of a thought, not a machine. "On what vector?" Kalen demanded, his claws tightening on the hilt of the ceremonial energy blade at his side. The technician's projection wavered. It is heading for Xylos, my lord, the dead world in the outer system." Xylos, a barren rock, stripped of its atmosphere by a stellar flare eons ago. It was a worthless, lifeless husk, a graveyard of a world noted on their charts only as a navigational hazard. Why would they go there? "It is a feint," Kalen declared, his resonance hardening into absolute certainty. "They will draw our fleet to the outer system, and then their main force will strike at the core worlds. It is a classic pincer strategy. We must not fall for it. We must strike the vessel now while it is isolated. But Valerius was not so sure. There was a deliberation to the ship's movement, a sense of purpose that did not feel like a military maneuver. It felt ceremonial. He watched the dark shape drift through the void, a question mark aimed at a forgotten world. His intuition, the same intuition that had guided him for centuries, screamed at him that this was the moment of truth, not a battle but a revelation. "No strategos," Valerius said, his voice imbued with a finality that silenced all further argument. "You will not attack. You will take the fleet to Xylos. You will form a perimeter. You will observe. You will not, under any circumstances, power your weapons or engage the human vessel unless I give the direct command. We have waited this long to understand. We will wait a little longer." Kalen's mandibles worked in silent protest, his entire being radiating dissent. But he could not disobey a direct order from the High Lord. He gave a sharp, formal bow, his mind a storm of frustrated fury, and turned to leave the chamber, the heavy thud of his footsteps echoing the Empire's march toward an unknown destiny. Lyra remained, her gaze fixed on the screen, her mind racing. "High Lord," she projected softly, "what do you believe they intend to do?" Valerius did not look away from the human ship, now a receding speck on the holographic display. The crimson light of the chamber seemed to deepen, to settle over him like a shroud. "I do not know," he admitted, the confession feeling like a crack in the foundations of his world. "But whatever it is, it will be the answer to everything. It will be our salvation, or it will be our end." And for the first time, he allowed the resonance to carry his own deep, personal fear to the rest of his council, a silent admission that the age of Cathar certainty was over. The age of humanity had begun. The void around Xylos was a silent theater of tension. A vast armada of Cathar warships, their crystalline hulls shimmering like a swarm of angry jewels, held a rigid formation at a respectful distance. Each vessel was a masterpiece of imperial might, bristling with quantum energy projectors and shielded by reality-warping fields. They were the sharpened sword of the Imperium, an instrument of absolute power that had pacified 1,000 systems. And they were all focused on a single, silent object that floated effortlessly before the dead, pockmarked face of the barren world. From the command deck of his flagship, the indomitable Will, Strategos Kalen watched the human ship through a magnified quantum entanglement viewer. The vessel's inscrutable darkness seemed to mock the power he had assembled. His orders were to observe, and the command was a physical torment. Every fiber of his being, every tenet of his military doctrine screamed that this was a trap. The humans had drawn them out, exposed his fleet in open space, and now the true attack would come. He saw phantoms in the dark between the stars, ghost fleets waiting for the signal to strike. His mind was a battlefield of suspicion and protocol. Beside him, a specialized cadre of sensor technicians monitored the human vessel, their psionic chatter a frantic symphony of confusion. "Still no conventional energy readings, Strategos," the lead technician reported, his thought pattern frayed with stress. "The gravimetric distortion around its hull is fluctuating. It's not a field. It's more like a rhythm, a pulse. And the quantum signature remains null. It's like staring at a hole in the universe." Kalen did not respond. His focus was on the ship itself. It had taken a stationary position in low orbit above Xylos' equator. It was doing nothing, simply waiting. For what? The tension on his bridge was so thick it felt like a physical pressure, a weight on the very air they psychically processed. The minutes stretched into an eternity. The Cathar fleet, a paragon of discipline, held its position, weapons cold but shields at maximum. Then something changed. It was not a visual event, but a sensation, a subtle shift in the fabric of reality that every Cathar in the fleet felt in their very being. It was a low, pervasive hum that vibrated not through the hulls of their ships, but through their minds, through the resonance itself. It was not a Cathar frequency. It was alien, impossibly complex, a chord of cosmic scale. On the main viewer, the human ship began to transform. Panels on its dark, featureless hull slid away, not with mechanical precision, but with an organic fluidity like the opening of an eye. From within the dark recesses, a light began to glow. It was not the harsh, focused light of a weapon, but a soft, ethereal luminescence, a swirling kaleidoscope of colors that defied description. It was the color of nebulae being born, of life just beginning. The hum intensified and the light coalesced into a beam, but it was not a beam of energy meant to destroy. It was wide, diffuse, and it descended from the human ship to touch the dead surface of Xylos. It was an aurora of creation, a waterfall of impossible light that bathed the barren plains in its glow. Kalen's hand flew to his console, his instinct screaming to open fire to end this before it could begin. This was the attack. This was the weapon they had been waiting for. But the reading still made no sense. Strategos, the sensor technician cried out, his mental voice cracking. The planet. The readings from the planet they are changing. Core temperature is rising. The dormant magnetic field is reigniting. Tectonic activity is spiking across the entire surface. Kalen stared, his warrior's mind unable to process what he was seeing. The beam of light was not glassing the surface. It was caressing it. Where the light touched the gray, dead dust, a deep, rich brown color was spreading like a stain, the color of fertile soil. Volcanoes, dormant for billions of years, began to erupt, not with destructive fury, but with controlled, steady plumes of gas, water, vapor, nitrogen, oxygen. An atmosphere was forming in minutes. The light was not a weapon of destruction. It was a tool of planetary engineering on a scale so vast, so rapid, it bordered on the divine. The human warship was not attacking the planet. It was resurrecting it. The low hum evolved, becoming a complex, layered melody of frequencies. Deep fissures opened on the planet's surface, not from tectonic stress but with deliberate design, and from them actual liquid water, began to pour forth, filling the newly formed chasms, creating rivers, lakes, and soon oceans. Clouds began to form in the nascent atmosphere, swirling into weather patterns. Within the space of a single hour, a dead world, a tombstone in the void, was being transformed into a vibrant, living sphere of blue and white and green. On the magnified viewers, they could see the final touch of the light beam. It was seeding the new continents with flora. Lush, green vegetation was spreading across the landmasses at a supernatural speed. The bridge of the indomitable will was silent. The Cathar, a race of conquerors and warriors, could only watch, their minds reeling from the sheer, overwhelming audacity of the act. They had come prepared for a battle of warships, for an exchange of devastating energy. They were instead witnessing a symphony of creation. This was not war. This was artistry. This was a power so far beyond their own, it rendered their entire military philosophy obsolete. What was the point of a weapon that could shatter a moon, when faced with a power that could build a world from dust? Kalen sank back into his command throne, his entire body trembling. The phantom fleets he had imagined vanished from his mind, replaced by the crushing, humbling reality of what he was witnessing. The humans had not been testing their defenses. They had not been planning an attack. They had been choosing a canvas. The fear he had felt before was a cold, sharp thing. This new feeling was a vast, drowning awe that threatened to shatter his very identity. They had brought an armada to bear against a gardener. As the final notes of the cosmic symphony faded and the beam of light retracted into the human ship, a new signal was detected. It was different from before. It was focused, precise, and aimed directly at Kalen's flagship. It was a communication request. "Open a channel," Kalen whispered, his voice hoarse. The main view screen, which had been showing the newly born world of Xylos, flickered and was replaced by an interior view from the human ship. The being that appeared was underwhelming. It was small, bipedal, and soft, with no visible armor or natural weapons. Its skin was pale, its head covered in a mane of dark hair. It was garbed in simple, dark blue fabric. It was a female of its species, and her face held an expression of calm, patient intelligence. Behind her was not a military bridge, but a room filled with strange, glowing interfaces and what looked like living plants, their green fronds visible in the periphery. "Strategos Kalen of the Cathar Imperium," the human said, and her voice, filtered through their translation matrix, was impossibly smooth and measured. It lacked the psionic undertones of Cathar speech, but it carried a weight of its own, a quiet confidence that was more commanding than any shout. "I am Ambassador Eva Rostova. On behalf of the Terran Confederacy, I apologize for our long silence. It was necessary for us to fully understand your language and customs before initiating formal contact. We wish to avoid any misunderstandings." Kalen could only stare. The sheer understatement of her words in the face of the miracle they had just performed was staggering. A deep, burning shame washed through him. He had been prepared to annihilate these people, and their first act was to offer a polite, formal greeting after gifting them a new world. It was not Kalen who responded, but a voice that resonated directly onto the bridge from the capital, a voice that carried the full weight and authority of the High Lord himself. Valerius and Lyra had been observing everything from the grand resonator chamber. "Ambassador Rostova," Valerius's voice echoed, calm and measured, though Kalen could feel the tremor of awe deep within his psionic signature. I am High Lord Valerius. What you have just done, our language has no words for it. You call your vessel a warship. You have just waged a war against entropy, against death itself. The human Rostova offered a small, subtle inclination of her head, a gesture of respect. We do not call this vessel a warship, High Lord. You do. Your language, when we first began to decipher it, had over 1,000 words for conflict and only a few for creation. We understood that your first impression of a vessel of this magnitude would be a military one. We designated it as a warship in our preliminary communications models to align with your probable perception. We find it is often best to meet others where they are, before inviting them to where we are. The profound, calculated logic of that statement struck the Cathar leadership like a physical blow. The humans had not only deciphered their language, they had analyzed their psychology, their entire cultural worldview, and had tailored their first contact to mitigate the Cathar's own aggressive instincts. Their silence had not been fear or arrogance. It had been an act of supreme, patient wisdom. And the purpose of this vessel? Lyra's voice joined the communication, filled with an insatiable curiosity. Its true name, its function. This is a Genesis engine, Ambassador Rostova explained, her calm expression unwavering. Its function is to create, to take barren, lifeless systems and seed them with the potential for life. Our core philosophy is that the universe's greatest resource is existence itself. We travel the stars not to conquer, but to cultivate. The readings your sensors found so confusing are a byproduct of its power source. The Genesis engine draws its energy from the quantum vacuum, from the very fabric of spacetime. It does not contain a reactor. It is a reactor, one that bends the laws of physics to accelerate natural processes. It is both a tool and a statement of our most sacred belief, that there is no greater calling than to turn a silent rock into a singing world. The explanation was both perfectly logical and utterly paradigm-shattering. The Cathar had spent millennia perfecting the art of taking worlds. The humans had spent their time perfecting the art of making them. It was a cultural and technological chasm so wide, the Cathar felt like primitives staring at a god. Why, Valerius asked, the single word containing the weight of his entire civilization's confusion. Why our system? Why give us this gift? Because you were here, Rostova said simply, as if it were the most obvious answer in the universe. And because the world was empty. We detected your civilization, a vast and ancient society. We saw your power, your discipline, your unity. We also saw a system with only one life-bearing world. We saw potential for growth, for a future grander than your past. We do not ask for payment. We do not ask for territory. The gift is the act itself. The transformation of Xylos is now a part of your history and a part of ours. It is a bridge between us. She then made a gesture, a slow, deliberate opening of her hand, an invitation. We would be honored, High Lord Valerius, if you and your council would join us aboard the Genesis engine, to see for yourselves that we are not warriors but builders, to begin a conversation that we hope will last for millennia. Kalen looked from the image of the calm human ambassador to the new blue-green jewel of a world hanging in the void where a dead rock had been only hours before. The orders to stand down, to power down weapons, had already been given. His fleet, the pride of the Imperium, now felt like a collection of meaningless, brutal trinkets. The war he had been so ready to fight was not only lost, it had never existed. He had prepared for an enemy, and instead he had found a force of nature, guided by a level of ethical and philosophical sophistication he could barely comprehend. His universe, and the Cathar's place in it, had been irrevocably and completely changed. The long, silent journey to the Genesis engine felt like a procession into a new reality. High Lord Valerius, Strategos Kalen, and Archivist Lyra traveled in a single, ornate diplomatic shuttle, a speck of imperial grandeur against the incomprehensible scale of the human vessel. As they approached, the dark, monolithic hull of the Genesis engine did not open a hangar bay in the conventional sense. Instead, a section of the ship's surface seemed to dissolve into a shimmering portal of soft white light, a seamless, silent invitation into its core. The Cathar vessel passed through the portal, and the transition was not accompanied by the usual clang of docking clamps or the hiss of atmosphere equalization. There was only a gentle, pervasive calm. They did not find themselves in a sterile docking bay, but in a space that defied all their expectations of a starship's interior. They had entered a cavern of impossible size, so vast that a soft, self-generated haze obscured the distant ceiling. The air was clean, fresh, and carried the scent of damp earth, blooming flora, and running water. A gentle, sun-like light emanated from the high ceiling, illuminating a landscape of rolling green hills, groves of towering trees with silver bark, and a river that flowed with crystal-clear water. The sound of birdsong, the genuine, chaotic melody of living creatures, echoed through the immense space. They had not docked with a ship. They had landed in a park, a nature preserve suspended in the heart of a machine that could birth worlds. Ambassador Eva Rostova was waiting for them as they disembarked. She stood alone on a path of smooth, gray stone, flanked by two of the silver-bark trees. She was not escorted by armed guards or menacing robotic drones. Her posture was relaxed, her hands held loosely at her sides. It was a display of utter and absolute confidence, not in her ability to repel an attack, but in the certainty that no attack would be forthcoming. "High Lord Valerius, Strategos Kalen, Archivist Lyra," she greeted them, her voice calm and clear in the open air. "Welcome to the heart of the Odyssey. It is our custom to welcome new friends into a place of life, not a chamber of steel." Valerius stepped forward, his ancient form moving with a renewed grace. He surveyed the impossible vista, the sheer biological vibrancy of it all. "You carry a world within your world maker," he stated, his thought voice a whisper of awe. "This is beyond our understanding of naval engineering." "We do not see it as engineering," Rostova replied with a faint smile. "We see it as stewardship. A ship that travels between the stars for centuries must be more than a machine. It must be a home. It must carry a memory of the world we came from and a promise of the worlds we hope to create. The Odyssey is as much an ecosystem as it is a vessel." Kalen remained silent, his warrior's mind struggling to reconcile the scene before him with a lifetime of military doctrine. He had expected command decks, weapon emplacements, engine rooms. He had expected a fortress. This was a sanctuary. His gaze scanned the trees, the hills, searching for hidden defenses, for any sign of the power that had reignited a planet's core. He found nothing. There were only civilians. Humans of all ages and descriptions walked along the paths in the distance, some tending to gardens, others gathered in groups, deep in conversation. He saw a man sitting by the river, painting the scene on a glowing canvas of light. He saw a group of children chasing luminous, butterfly-like constructs through a meadow. Children. They had brought their children on this warship. The realization struck him with the force of a plasma bolt. A species that brings its young to the frontier, that builds parks inside its most powerful creations, is not a species geared for conquest. Their power was a means to an end, and that end was not domination, but life itself. Lyra, however, was in her element. Her archivist's mind was alight with a million questions. She approached Rostova, her movements fluid with intellectual excitement. "Ambassador, your technology, your philosophy, it implies a societal evolution that must have taken millennia. Our own history is steeped in conflict, in the struggle for resources, for territory. It is the crucible that forged our empire. How did your people move past this? How did you achieve a unity of purpose profound enough to build this?" She gestured to the world around them. Rostova's expression grew more contemplative. She began to walk slowly along the stone path, inviting them to follow. "It was not an easy path, Archivist. Humanity's history is as violent as your own, perhaps more so. We nearly destroyed ourselves, our home world. We fought over everything, land, resources, beliefs. We were a species at war with itself." They walked past a cascading waterfall that fed into a serene pool, its surface reflecting the gentle light from above. "Our transformation came not from a single victory or a dominant ideology, but from a collective realization born of near extinction. We realized that our conflicts were based on a false premise, the idea of scarcity. We were fighting for pieces of a single pie when we had the ability to bake an infinite number of pies. Our greatest minds turned from creating better weapons to creating unlimited energy, to mastering matter fabrication, to understanding the very code of life itself. When there is no hunger, no poverty, no lack, the reasons for war begin to seem absurd." Post-scarcity, Lyra breathed, the concept a theoretical dream among Cathar philosophers. "We have debated its possibility for centuries, but deemed it an unstable state, that the drive to acquire more is fundamental to sentient life." "The drive to acquire is not the same as the drive to hoard," Rostova corrected gently. "We replace the desire for material wealth with the desire for knowledge, for experience, for creation. Our currency is not metal or energy credits, it is discovery. Our heroes are not generals, but scientists, artists, and explorers. The Genesis engine is the ultimate expression of our culture. Its creation brought our entire species together in a singular, grand purpose. Why conquer your neighbor's house when you can build a new one for them among the stars?" Valerius listened, and with every word he felt the ancient, rigid foundations of his empire crumbling. The Cathar Imperium was built on control, on order, on the suppression of individuality for the sake of the collective resonance. Theirs was a society of perfect, static harmony. Humanity, it seemed, had achieved a different kind of unity, a dynamic, ever-expanding harmony built not on suppression, but on the infinite potential of the individual directed toward a common, creative goal. As they reached a crest in the hill, they looked down upon a structure that was different from the surrounding nature. It was a wide, low-lying building of white and silver, its architecture a blend of graceful curves and complex geometry. It seemed to hum with a quiet energy. "This is the Lyceum," Ristova explained. "It is the mind of the Odyssey, a repository of all our collected knowledge and the place where we study the universe." She led them inside. The interior was a vast, open space, a library of galaxies. Holographic displays of star charts, biological diagrams, and complex physical equations floated in the air like captured constellations. Humans of all ages were present, some studying the displays, others engaged in quiet, intense debate. There was no hierarchy, no sense of rank. A youth with bright, curious eyes was animatedly discussing a complex quantum formula with a woman whose hair was white with age. It was a collaborative dance of intellect. Ristova led them to the center of the Lyceum, where a colossal, slowly rotating sphere of light dominated the space. It was a perfect, real-time model of their entire galaxy. Billions of points of light represented individual stars. "We came here to this arm of the galaxy for a reason," Ristova said, her voice dropping to a more serious, somber tone. The grand, philosophical tour was over. This was the true purpose of their meeting. "We did not stumble upon your empire by accident, High Lord." She gestured to the galactic map. A single point of light on the far side of the Cathar Imperium began to pulse with a faint, red glow. "For centuries, we have been monitoring a signal. It is incredibly ancient, predating the rise of our own civilization by millions of years. It is not a natural phenomenon. It is artificial, structured, a beacon of immense power." Kalen stepped forward, his military instincts finally finding a familiar concept to grasp. "A beacon? From whom?" "We do not know," Ristova admitted. "The civilization that created it is long gone. The signal originates from a cluster of dead stars and black holes, a cosmic graveyard, but the signal itself, it is a message, a warning." She manipulated a console, and a new display appeared beside the galactic map. It was a waveform, a complex pattern of energy that was both elegant and deeply unsettling. "The signal is a lament," she continued. "A mathematical equation that describes a civilization's rise, its discovery of science, its unification, its expansion into space. It is a story told in the universal language of physics." Lyra stared at the equation, her mind, adept at deciphering complex data, beginning to grasp the narrative embedded within the numbers. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "It is," Ristova agreed. "Until the end." She zoomed in on the final part of the waveform. The elegant, structured pattern dissolved into a chaotic, screaming burst of static. "The equation ends here, abruptly. It describes a force, an entity, a phenomenon. Our language has no word for it. It is not a civilization. It is not a natural disaster. It is a form of cosmic negation, a shadow that fell over their part of the galaxy and consumed them. The signal they left behind is all that remains, a tombstone broadcasting a final, desperate warning across the eons. It is coming. It consumes the light. Do not be alone." A profound chill settled over the Cathar delegation, a cold that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. The silence in the Lyceum was absolute, the gravity of Ristova's words pressing down on them all. "Our journey in the Genesis engines is not just an act of philosophical expression," Ristova concluded, her gaze meeting Valerius's. "It is a race. We are not just building worlds, we are building a network. We are planting the seeds of life and connection across the galaxy, creating a chain of light against the coming dark. We seek out advanced civilizations like your own not to impress them, but to recruit them, to stand with them." She turned to the galactic map. "The signal has been stable for millennia, but recently it has begun to change. The decay in its final chaotic section is accelerating. This means the source of the silence, the consuming shadow, is moving. It is expanding, and its path of travel is aimed directly toward this quadrant of the galaxy." The full picture finally slammed into place in Valerius's mind. The impossible ship, the gift of a new world, the patient diplomacy, it was all a prelude. A desperate, magnificent, and terrifyingly urgent invitation. The humans were not conquerors. They were Paul Revere riding through the cosmos, shouting a warning that no one else could hear. Humanity's first contact with the Cathar was not an act of exploration. It was an act of self-preservation, an attempt to forge an alliance before the arrival of a mutual enemy. An enemy so vast and terrible it had devoured a civilization of world builders. Valerius looked at the faces of his companions. Lyra's expression was one of rapt, fearful fascination. Kaelin's was a mask of stone, but his mind, for the first time, was not calculating battle odds against the humans, but against this new, nameless dread. He was a warrior who had just been told that the concept of a battlefield was about to be rewritten, that the enemy was not an army, but the end of all things. High Lord Valerius turned back to Ambassador Rostova. He saw not a soft, unassuming biped, but a herald of a new age, a representative of a species that had stared into the abyss and, instead of recoiling in fear, had decided to fill it with as much light as they could before the darkness fell. He saw a peer, an equal, a necessary friend. He inclined his head, a gesture of profound respect he had not given to any being outside his own species in his long life. The ancient pride of the Cathar Imperium fell away, replaced by a clear, cold, and galvanizing sense of purpose. Their long history of conquest was over. A new history, a history of survival, of a shared struggle against the silent, encroaching night, was about to begin. "Ambassador Rostova," Valerius said, his voice resonating not just with his own authority, but with the dawning, unified will of the entire Cathar civilization. "Tell us what you need. The Cathar Imperium will stand with you."